Whoa, what is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video, doing my third draft video with Football Grump. So far, we've done the corner position, we've done the wide receiver position, at least day one. I definitely want to have him back on and talk more day two guys at those positions. Maybe we'll just combine it into one as we're getting closer to the draft. Definitely want to do a mock draft with you as well. Talk about some late round sleepers. We got a lot we still got to do on the channel regarding the draft. But today we're going to talk about the position that I'm most excited about. I'm boring when it comes to football. I love the offensive line. I think that's where games are won and lost. Obviously, the quarterback's the most important position, but I frequently say the most important unit is the men up front. That's what's going to give you the ability to be able to get the most out of your offense, to protect your quarterback, give your wide receivers times to run their routes, give your running back holes to develop. So, and something that's been lacking with the Giants for years, and it's probably why I have such an obsession about the offensive line, is our offensive line. We've had probably collectively the worst offensive line in the NFL since our last Super Bowl. It's been that bad. And when you look at the list of centers, this from Walter on Twitter, I mean, my God, before I pull in the grump, just look at this. Sean O'Hara started 91 games at center for the Giants from 2004 to 2010, made 3 Pro Bowls. Since 2011, Weston Richburg is second on the list with 35 starts. David Boss is third with 30. You're talking about over the course of 13 years. That's 2 years worth of starts for both of those guys on average. Center should be right up there with some of the Giants' biggest needs. And Walter, I certainly agree. But yeah, and I think the last guy is Richburg to start 2 straight years at the center spot for the Giants. And that's going back to 2016 and 2017. So we've had a revolving door at that position. But Grump, what's going on, my man?
What is happening? I'm ready to talk centers. It's one of my favorite positions to talk about. I think it's super duper important. I've got my victory beer for my New Jersey Devils that finished their season series with the New York Rangers, which was kind of an exhibition game for the upcoming playoffs that I'm super excited for. But that's a story for another week. Yeah, I mean, it's been the loudest and worst kept secret in the NFL. The Giants have had a bad offensive line for many years now. It's been a reoccurring joke on NFL Talk Radio and I guess Talk TV that the Giants used to be known for things such as great defense and great offensive line and haven't been known for either in quite a while. The offensive line is also just a lot harder to build up. I mean, you have to get 5 guys to gel. You need, and it's no shock that the offensive line coach is like usually the most sought after assistant coach in the NFL. I mean, the most important unit, as you said, is the offensive line. Nothing on offense works if the offensive line doesn't work. So in my opinion, the center spot is usually the quarterback of the offensive line, I guess. I mean, typically speaking, the best centers in the NFL are the ones who know the assignment of every single offensive lineman, and they have to be that anchor in the middle to give the quarterback room to step up in the pocket. And I mean, Lord knows Saquon Barkley has not been able to be the best he could be without a good center, and Daniel Jones has certainly struggled to be the best Daniel Jones he could be without a really good center as well. We're starting to make some progress. Got ourselves an all-pro left tackle. Got ourselves a top 10 pick right tackle. Center is the next big thing to invest in. You get those 3, and I think you've got yourself the bones of a very good offensive line to build around and plug and play, and maybe get in some cheap veterans or get some depth guys or developmental guys to be the guards. This position's super important, and you can't screw it up. And for the last 13 years, you said, they've been kind of stacking Band-Aids over a wound. It's time to do some surgery.
It's been a long time coming, and hopefully this is the year we find that guy. We'll see if the Giants attack the position, but you got to figure, I mean, we lost Nick Gates. We lose Feliciano. So you would have thought if they were going to go with a stopgap, they probably would have retained one of those guys. But to be fair, Joe Schoen has come out as recently as about, I think it was 2 days ago, when he was at the general manager and owner meetings, and he said he's completely fine with the guys that they've got. Now, he did leave open the door that they could certainly draft the center in this year's draft, and they may not be done in free agency. But he talked about how they've given snaps at the center position to Bredesen. They've given snaps at the center position to Shane Lemieux. And they've given snaps at the center position to, I can't remember. There was another guy. I can't remember off the top of my head. But I'm starting to lean, Grump, more and more that I think we're going to go with a stopgap at center this year to start the year. I'm not saying we're not going to draft the center. I think we're probably going to draft one of the guys we're going to talk about in this video. But I think we're going to start Bredesen, if I had to guess, at the center spot to start the year. I think they're going to look at it as a stopgap. And right now, if you ask me what's your projected 2023 opening day starting offensive line, as depressing as it may sound, I think it's Andrew Thomas. I think it's Ezeudu. I think it's Bredesen. I think it's probably, obviously,
Lewinsky.
Glowinski, our free agent acquisition last year, and Neal. I think that's going to be our starting offensive line to start the year, and probably a developmental center, similar to the likes of a guy like Ezeudu last year. We took in the 3rd round, who you knew was going to be kind of a project that they kind of slowly eased into the starting lineup. I think that's probably the approach that Joe Schoen is going to take, at least from when you read through the tea leaves with some of the things that he said. I don't expect us to go center in the 1st round. I wouldn't be upset, even though a lot of people say, and I'm very curious to get your take throughout the video, a lot of people say there's not really a Tyler Linderbaum in this draft. There's not really like a slam dunk 1st round center prospect. And the Giants obviously have a lot of other needs on this team. We realize that with the wide receiver, the cornerback. We could always use another linebacker, another edge rusher. Like, there's a lot of ways they could go with some of their earlier picks. But I'm starting to lean more and more that it's probably round 3 or later. When we go center, I think we're going to go center, but I don't think it's going to be with one of our first 2 picks.
Before we get into, well, I guess, what do you make of that? How does that make you feel when you hear the general manager of the New York Giants say that he is comfortable with the guys he has in the offensive line room as it is?
Yeah, he specifically was talking about the center position when asked about it.
Okay.
The way that I read that, because there's no way he could look at this roster and be like, Ben Bredesen is the guy. He's going to be my Kevin Mawai. He's going to be my 10-year center. He's going to, think about some of the greatest centers throughout. He cannot look at Ben Bredesen that way. I think he views Ben Bredesen the same way he viewed a guy like John Feliciano last year. And when he's talking about Bredesen, he's talking from the context of it's a stopgap option. I'm fine with him being that guy that fills that void for 1 year as I build up other areas of need on this football team. I don't think he views Bredesen that way. I think he views him as a guy I could get by with as I groom my future center, or potentially find my future center in the 2024-2025 draft. But I don't think he has his long-term answer on this roster at that position.
It is a very hilarious thing for him to say, because like Dave Gettleman's famous last words were literally that.
Yeah.
Which was, by the way, when Dave Gettleman said it, it was before like 3 of them got hurt.
And Dave Gettleman that year let our most accomplished offensive lineman at the time out the door.
That's true.
Obviously due to cap purposes. So, yeah, that was a year where I was scratching my head. And I think going into this year, if we don't take a center, probably by the latest at round 3, I'm going to be skeptical.
I'm going to be pissed. I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, I am not going to hold Joe Schoen to a different standard than I hold Dave Gettleman. So to me, that would be folly. Of course, it's going to completely depend on the way the draft board falls. I'm not going to hold anything against him if for whatever reason 6 centers go in the 1st round and they don't belong there. I'm not going to hold it against him if he doesn't want to waste value on guys. But that statement makes me worried. I don't super love that. I am not comfortable with I am hardly comfortable with Ben Bredesen being a starter at guard.
I am hardly comfortable with anyone on the interior being a starter, period.
Yep. I agree with you.
And Neal, whatever, he's developing. He's going to be our starting right tackle. I'm not worried about him.
Agreed.
But on the interior, yeah, we need a dramatic upgrade. So we'll see. But I'm with you. I'm not comfortable at all.
And I agree with you.
Hopefully Ezeudu develops. I think he's a big key this year on the line.
And I think he will. I mean, I think when you saw him, I think you saw a lot of good qualities that were just raw. And were probably, slower developing because he was moved around so much. Right. Dating way back into college. So I think that had Josh just been given one position to just work on and refine, he wouldn't have come into the NFL so raw. So I'm not as worried about Ezeudu, I guess, in the long term. But as far as starting next year, I mean, I don't know what to expect. I mean, he ended the year injured, did he not?
Yeah, he was hurt. He was kind of dinged up throughout the year at different points. Same thing with Neal, who actually had an injury during the year. So we had a ton of injuries. Our entire rookie class got hurt.
That's true. But don't worry, there is new turf on the way.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully that helps. The first thing I wanted to jump into, because you hear this a lot when people talk about offensive linemen, because it's so hard to really judge of which guy fits where, especially at the center position. We were talking about this before, we started the podcast. Like, it's hard to judge these guys on an individual basis. And a lot of the center position comes down to intelligence. And as fans, because they're kind of the quarterback of the offensive line in terms of being able to read pre-snap, to tell the linemen, their assignments when they see the defense, even though that a lot of that falls on the quarterback as well. But your center is kind of the quarterback of the offensive line. And we don't get to, we're not in the middle of these interviews. We don't get to interview these players like Joe Schoen. And a lot of the evaluation with the offensive line and the center position specifically is going to come down to that. And it's also hard for us to judge the type of offensive lineman that we're going to be looking for. You got to figure at the center spot, you want more of an athletic guy, a guy that could pull, a guy that could get to the second level. You don't want, one of these, old traditional offensive linemen, because you're looking to do different things with your offense. So you got to figure they're probably looking for more of an athletic guy. So I think that's a reason why a lot of people look at this RAS score when it comes to offensive linemen. You see this all the time on Twitter when they're comparing some players. And I think it's a big reason why people have brought up the argument that there's not a first-round center in this year's draft. Because when you look, I pulled up 2020 to 2023. When you look at a lot of these high-end guys, Creed Humphrey, who didn't even go in the first round, I think he was a second-round pick. He had a perfect RAS score of 10. Quinn Miners, who we talked about, we both liked him in the pre-draft back in 2021. Giants didn't end up taking him. I don't even know how he's done in the NFL. He had a really high RAS score. The highest guy, actually, ironically, is a guy that a lot of people have as a day 3 guy. And I've seen a lot of Giants fans talk him very highly. That's Ricky Stromberg. Maybe he's around round 3 type guy, back end of day 2 out of Arkansas. He had a 9.77 grade. And then Luke Whippler, who a lot of people really like coming out of Ohio State. He's relatively high here with a 9.30 on the RAS score. Then in terms of guys we're going to talk about, the next highest, I mean, you got to go all the way to the next page. So there's not really a lot of guys that had really high relative athletic scores, which is I guess at least a tool that a lot of people go by when they evaluate prospects in the NFL draft. You got John Michael Schmitz, who's pretty much the consensus number 1 center by most people's standards in this year's draft with a 7.86. Olu Oluwatimi, I've seen a lot of people talk about him come out of Michigan, 7.79. So those scores aren't really jumping off the page. Jared Patterson at 7.25. So it's kind of hard.
Juice Scruggs is a little bit higher, though. He's a 7.93 if you scroll.
Who the Giants actually talked to, and they've been rumored to be interested in out of Minnesota. Not Minnesota, rather Penn State.
Yeah. I mean, you nailed it. I'm sure people think that I don't know what I'm talking about most of the time or whatever, but this truly is one of the hardest positions for me to judge, and certainly the hardest in the offensive line, as you said, because so much of it relies on intelligence and mental makeup and things like that you just, if you can see it on film, it's incredibly hard to see. I mean, let's just pretend that Nick Gates didn't get hurt, right? Would you have been okay with Nick Gates being a center for a couple of years? Would you be worried about needing to draft one this year? Would you be okay rolling with him for a couple of years and worrying about other things?
Listen, I love Nick Gates, okay? He's exactly, and I know everybody loves Nick Gates. He's hard not to love. I always thought Nick Gates was overrated by the fan in terms of as a player. I think he brings good attitude. I think he's a great leader, but I never thought he was a guy that I wanted as the long-term answer at the center position.
No. But I mean, would you say that center was an absolute need if he were on the roster this year and wasn't hurt?
And he was completely healthy and I wasn't worried about injuries? Correct. He's at least a guy that could be a stopgap option for a few years. Yeah, I'll get on board. Yeah.
And why would you ever think during the draft process that Nick Gates would ever be a functioning center? I mean, you know what I mean? There was no way to know that. I mean, right. I guess if you were incredibly astute, you could be hey, I could see him being a center.
He played guard and tackle at Nebraska.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. To scout this stuff is incredibly difficult. So, yeah, I don't know. I guess it's just a preface because, I mean, I've seen around I guess Twitter and then just analyst write-ups and stuff like that. These centers are placed all over the place, right? I mean, with the exception of John Michael Schmitz being the number 1 guy, I think everybody else is kind of jumbled.
Yeah. So and that's what we're going to start with. We're going to start with the guy who's number 1 on most people's boards, and that's John Michael Schmitz. And I've watched a couple of film breakdowns on him. The book on him, he does everything pretty well from everybody that I've listened to. I'm curious to get your take on him. People don't love his age. I think he's 25, so he's a bit older. People say he doesn't necessarily have the ceiling of a guy like a Tyler Linderbaum. Like, he's not your traditional first-round center because they don't feel like he could hit like an elite status. But he seems like he's sturdy. He's going to be a good center. That's what most people feel about him at the NFL level. He seems like he's a safe prospect at this position. In terms of his PFF, they didn't give a grade for him in 2022. I don't know. Some centers they did, some centers they didn't. But well, in college this past year, he had 465 run blocking snaps, 302 pass blocking snaps. He had 2 sacks, given up 1 hit, and 5 hurries in 12 games played, 767 overall snaps. So there's the book on Schmitz. He's an older prospect. I think he's 25, right?
You know, I actually don't have that written down, but a lot of the prospects at every position are a little bit older. The COVID year, like, really did a weird thing that you got. It would have been weird like 6 years ago to hear of a guy being 25 and coming out in the NFL. And now it's like in every position group, there's one guy that I'm considering that is a little bit older. So it's just
24.
something that
I looked it up as you were talking. He's 24, just turned 24.
Okay. Oh, is he just turned 24, which means he'll be 24 at the start of the season too.
Yeah.
Which is good. But yeah, just in general, that's something I'm not ignoring. But look, here's what I'm going to say about the criticism of upside and ceiling. 2020 offensive tackle class, there were 4 tackles.
Yeah.
Right? Andrew Thomas, Jedrick Wills, Tristan Wirfs, and Mekhi Becton. Mekhi Becton was, as far as I remember, and you can correct me if maybe I'm mistaken, Mekhi Becton was the highest ceiling guy there, correct?
I think most people's consensus were Wirfs and Becton were the ceiling guys because of Wirfs' athleticism and Becton's overall combination of athleticism and size.
Right. And Andrew Thomas was regarded as
safe
with the lowest ceiling.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Giants fans don't give a flying shit about Andrew Thomas's ceiling right now, right? He was. Does any Giant fan want Mekhi Becton instead?
He was arguably the best left tackle in football last year. So if he didn't have a high ceiling, I don't know what to tell you.
I'm just saying that upside is important. It's not everything. I would say, especially on offensive line, floor is pretty goddamn important. If the floor is a starter at the NFL, I almost don't care about upside right now with this team and this position they're in. I mean, I don't think that this team is in a position, and this is what I said in 2020 when I said they should draft Andrew Thomas. They are not in a position to rear back and take a huge home run swing for the fences on an upside guy. They ain't got shit on the offensive line, and they need to get it right. It doesn't have to be the best guy. It just can't be the wrong guy. And if you look at it now, would you agree that Mekhi Becton would have been the wrong guy?
Of course.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So when we talk about offensive line on a rebuilding franchise, upside to me is very important. It's not the most important. So while I agree, John Michael Schmitz, not the highest upside guy in this group. Definitely don't think that. He is my number 1 center in this group. I don't think he'll go in the first round, but I could see it happening. I think it's more likely he's going to be very early day 2. But I mean, like you said, he's solid at just about everything. He shines in the open field. He's athletic. He's quick. He runs with good angles to get good body position and cut guys off because, you know, sometimes offensive line, they're just not going to get there in time. But if you can get to the right spot, you can still get your runner free. I think that, and also at the second level, he can blow people up, which is always fun. I think he's an active hand fighter, which is always something I think most guys are not coming out of college. And when he does lose, he doesn't lose badly very often. If he loses, it's usually a struggle and it's after a couple seconds or whatever. He seems very intelligent. You know, as we were talking about like intelligence and what you can see on film, I've seen him react to very late blitz showings correctly. Things like that. I've seen him calling out things to other players, other blitzes coming on the edge. I've seen him pointing out. That's a plus. I'll take that. I didn't see anybody else in this group doing that. As far as where he needs to get better, though, I'd like to see the strength go up. I don't think that he utilizes all the strength that he possesses. And I think some of that has to do with a little bit of demeanor, right? I don't think he's soft or anything, but there are just some guys you can see are just built with nasty in him.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think he's that guy.
Not from what I've
Um,
seen, but again, I've heard that about several other offensive lineman prospects, and they worked out just fine. I've heard that Tristan
yeah,
Wirfs was the meanest guy, and you hear that about a
he
lot.
definitely plays through the whistle too. So I
Yeah,
mean, it's just a matter of I think a coach can get the strength that he currently possesses and will build upon and get it to come out a little bit more. I think he has more than he actually shows sometimes. I think maybe it's a technique thing or maybe it's, I don't know what it is, but yeah, I think he's
it
solid. He
sounds
doesn't
like
have like a huge downside.
it sounds like you like him. He's very safe,
Hmm.
but you don't want to draft him because it sounds like you view him as a very early day two guy, and you're probably not in love with taking him at 25.
No, I'm not in love with taking him at 25. I think if he becomes the Giants' first pick, it better be after a trade down, and I'd be okay with that.
Right, right. So you don't you if he's your number one,
Hmm.
you don't view a first. You don't have a first round grade for any of the centers in this draft.
No, I mean I have him. Right now until I actually do work on every player that I'm going to do work on. My actual positioning is like a range, and right now my range for him is early day 2, fringe day 1. I
Right,
could see him going 29, 30, 31, 32, somewhere in there,
right.
but I don't
Okay.
think he'll go more than that.
So if we're gonna get him, it's probably gonna be in a trade down, or he unexpectedly drops to 57.
Sure. I mean,
Which
do you think if all the first round corners are gone and a lot of the wide receivers they like are gone, that they would take him, or do you think they would trade down or take something else?
I mean, I think it depends. It depends on who's available.
Hmm.
I'm starting to lean more and more that I don't think we're taking a first round center under any circumstance
Yeah, I
because
think after what Joe Shane said, I agree with you.
yeah, and I could convince myself that if all those guys were off the board, they could take an edge. If there was a really good edge there, they could take a linebacker. I don't think we're going center in the first round. I think it's very possible we go center at 57. But I don't think we're going to go center at 25. I'd be very surprised at this point.
Yeah, I don't think so either, but I do think that they value it a little bit more than Joe Shane is letting on.
I agree with that. I definitely think it's still possible, very possible, we could take one at 57. And if we do take one at 57, it may be this behemoth because that's exactly what that's exactly what Avila looks like coming out of TCU. And the Giants were just at the TCU Pro Day. He didn't have a RAS score, which means maybe he didn't participate in the combine. I'm not sure. But they were just at the TCU Pro Day. I think it was yesterday. And I'm sure he was one of the players that they may have been talking about. Obviously, the guy that was getting the headlines was Quentin Johnston, the number one wide receiver prospect who we talked about a few days ago. But Avila is a guy, he's built maybe more like a guard in terms of his stature, but he's monstrous. In terms of his grades with PFF this past year, he had a 71 grade. We were talking about it before. TCU does throw a whole lot. And if you look at it, look at the pass block snaps. Like, just to put it in comparison to Schmitz had 302 pass block snaps. This dude had 540. 1,020 snaps overall. Didn't surrender a sack. Gave up 2 hits and 9 hurries well at TCU. He's a prospect I'm excited about because he's massive, but I want to get your take on him.
I have him rated a little bit lower. I have him rated 4th, but I'll say that take that with a grain of salt because I think after John Michael Schmitz, I think there's a collective of a couple of guys. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys that I think are really, really, really close.
Right.
And I think teams will pick them based on how they value certain traits and perhaps their offensive blocking system, or I guess interviews that I'm not privy to will be a determining factor. But one thing that I think certainly fits the Giants scheme, he played center and guard.
Right.
I mean, Josh Ezeudu, the one thing you can say about it, I don't think I've seen that many offensive linemen come in that played 4 out of 5 positions on the offensive line. Certainly something that I think they look for. That versatility and just being able to, on a whim in the middle of a game when your center breaks his leg in half, being able to switch around the 3 interior positions and not miss a beat. That's something that only really happens when people have true versatility like Josh Ezeudu and Steve Avila. I do think that there's some things he needs to improve on, and that's why I have him a little bit lower. I certainly don't think he has any sort of like ability as a tackle, because his lateral step is a little bit slow and sluggish. And I think that might come with the extra 30 pounds he's carrying around. But you can see when he is left in space and he has to kind of like deal with a quicker defensive tackle, he's almost at the point of turning his hips way sooner than other guys should be. So that's something that concerns me a little bit because I don't know how much better that's going to get.
Mhm.
The other thing, and I think this thing is definitely correctable, is he doesn't seem to generate drive in the run game. He doesn't lose his blocks in the run game. He gets good positioning. He turns guys around. He walls them off, but he doesn't move anybody. And at TCU, you're not really playing Georgia, except in the national championship, I guess.
That didn't work out too well.
Yeah, I don't know that was even a game.
Yeah.
But that's something I think maybe it's like a pad level thing, or maybe it's just a coaching thing. It's like, dude, drive your legs, move your feet, get going. Those are my two concerns with him. But other than that, versatile, big guy, ideal body shape. And he doesn't lose. He doesn't lose in the pass blocking.
He's 334 pounds. He is massive. 6'4", 334. So he's definitely the biggest guy. Like, just to put it in context, like the centers we're going to be talking about, let's see, 303, 301, 313, 309, 306, 306. So all of them are between like 300 and 310 pounds. This guy stands out. He's 332 pounds. And he's around the right height. Generally, you want your center to be a little bit lower to the ground than a tackle, which is why it was kind of a little bit unconventional for like a guy like Nick Gates, who I think is like 6'6". Usually you want your center to be 6'3", 6'4", and that's where he is at 6'4". So there's a guy I'm excited about, guy that I at least have my eye on as a potential prospect at 57. And I'm sure that's kind of where you have him, right? If the Giants are going to draft him, and I'm sure with a couple of the other guys we're going to be talking about, that's probably where they're going to have to take him.
I am as a clear day 2 guy for sure.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure where he's going to land, but 57, I'd be perfectly comfortable. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you see him potentially getting to like 89, where we pick in the third? It's possible.
It's really, especially with interior offensive linemen, it gets tricky. I think it's less likely with him because he has that versatility.
Right.
As soon as you have versatility, people are like, well, I mean, we need a guard really badly, and this guy's good, so we're going to take him. And shit, if we, God, I would hate this, but like, let's just say the Eagles, right? They lost Isaac Samula, right? And Jason Kelce agreed to come back this year, but I mean, how much longer? He could easily be a plug-and-play guard with the upside to be the center of the future for them, right?
It's a good point. Hopefully they don't take him, because they do have a late first-round pick. They're picking after us in the second round, but they have a late first round.
They have a lot of holes to fill now, so
they do.
I don't know.
They do. You never know, though. They certainly could. They obviously value the trenches.
Just smart GM.
Next guy we're going to talk about, been high on a lot of people's boards. I remember reading a lot of reports when Whippler was coming out of Ohio State, and he announced that he was going to be drafted before Schmitz kind of took off during the Senior Bowl. A lot of people had him as the number 1 rated center in this year's draft class at one point. He's 6'3", 303. He's I think he's 22 years old, if I'm not mistaken, coming out of Ohio State. We'll go over some of his PFF stats this past year, but certainly a solid prospect at the center position who the Giants certainly could be looking into. 13 games played, had 827 snaps, 378 run, 449 pass, gave up only 1 sack, 0 hits, and 7 hurries. So certainly was strong for Ohio State this past year. Of course, it doesn't hurt when you got C.J. Stroud and all the weapons that they're throwing to over there. Makes it a lot easier to block. But give me your take on him.
Well, you missed out on 2 of the most important things when it comes to Luke Whippler. And one is that he's a Jersey kid, right?
Okay, good call.
Okay. Also, if you can put his picture back up there, that is the face of an offensive lineman. Look at that. That's a dude who hits people.
That dude looks like he just got back from Whataburger. Like he's definitely a guy that doesn't miss a lot of meals.
Yes. No, I mean, I like Luke Whippler a lot. I have him rated lower than just about everybody else. I have him rated 6. But again, he's in this cluster of guys on day 2 that I think could mix and match, could be moved around. My biggest thing with him, that's a knock on him, he does whiff blocks. And I think the biggest thing is that he doesn't punch, man. Like, he tries to like slam his body in and then use his arms to like bench press guys away from him, especially at the second level. And when you do that at the second level against the more twitchy guys, they just move around him. You can see multiple examples of him going for like a big slam at the second level and just totally missing. Right. Again, that is definitely coachable. I don't think he's completely flawed. I do think that it's not going to keep him from being like a day 1 starter or whatever. If that's the only thing that's screwing him up or whatever, but it's going to screw up plays for sure, especially at the NFL level. You go up there. I mean, if it happened at the college level in the Big Ten, it's 100% going to happen in the NFL. until it gets corrected. And that's my biggest thing is it's just he's got to be taught to just punch people, use your hands a lot more. I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, and that's not like a super uncommon thing. I probably say this a lot, but like hand fighting and blocking is one of the more developed skills. It usually happens after everything else because footwork, you got to get down first. You got to get your anchor and your pad level.
It's the same thing on the other side of the ball with the edge rushers, right? That's what they say. Like a lot of times they develop the hand technique and the pass rush moves in their sophomore season. So it works for both sides of the line.
100%. I would be very happy with Luke Whippler, but I would say he is much more developmental than Steve Avila and John Michael Schmitz.
So you think he's a more polished prospect going into the pros in terms from a mental standpoint?
Luke Whippler?
Oh, maybe I misheard what you said. What did you just say?
I would be perfectly happy with him. My biggest knock on him is the hand fighting shit and whiffing. He's trying. It almost feels like he's trying to do like something big. You know what I mean? And it really just needs to be more effective than big. Like you don't need to slam the guy out. Just if you actually blocked him, it would help. And I think that can be, that's really my biggest concern with him. Everything else, I think he's young, he's got high upside. I would be cool with this, but I do think that he'll take a little bit more time than Avila and JMS to
I misheard
develop that way.
You're saying he's more of a developmental piece, which is what you're going to expect with day two guys. I mean, you're not
and younger guys for that matter.
Yeah, you're not going to expect this guy to just step in and just be I think if we drafted a guy like him and probably almost any guy outside of probably Schmitz, maybe Avila, but probably not. They're probably not starting day one for this team. It's probably going to be Bredesen to start.
You think so? Oh yeah, maybe.
And I'm not saying they wouldn't get inserted into the starting lineup relatively early. Maybe I'm wrong, but if they take a center second, third round, I could see them easing them in, not just throwing them into the starting lineup day one. But we'll see if they elect to go that route. Next guy we're going to talk about. You want to talk about a guy that has been the darling of the combine, Joe Tippmann. He's the tallest guy on this list. He's 6'6", 313 pounds, and certainly the most athletic. He had the highest RAS score. He ran a 4.940. So obviously a guy that is probably the most athletic of any of the centers on this list out of Wisconsin. Big Ten traditionally. They have strong offensive linemen. Had a high PFF grade of 78.7. Gave up 2 hits, 2 hurries, 1 sack. The pass block snaps are much lower, which makes sense. Big Ten, 359 pass block snaps, 339 run block snaps. He had 758 overall offensive snaps this past year. Didn't give up a sack the year before, too, if you look at that. It's only 1 sack over his last 2 years while playing for Wisconsin. Give me your thoughts on him. Definitely a guy that's been moving up a lot of mock drafts.
Well, Joe Tippmann does not fit your ideal. As you were saying, Nick Gates being 6'6" is strange. Joe Tippmann is 6'6" and 313 pounds. So when we're talking about Steve Avila's weight, when you compared Steve Avila's 334 to the other guys you mentioned 313, this guy has like 3 inches on Steve Avila and is still 15 pounds lighter than him. Yeah, you said it. With athleticism, he's productive, he's effective, he has plus ability to get to the open field. I think he has a really good understanding of body positioning, and he uses that to twist and torque guys out of the hole, and I guess just generally out of his way. I think his biggest problem is he struggles to sustain blocks. Like you'll see him make the initial contact, and he'll hold it for just a second and then kind of get tossed around a little bit. And I think that has to do with his punch placement. I think his punches are a little bit too low, but that's super duper correctable. I wouldn't be really worried about that. I think the biggest plus for him is that he was incredibly productive for 3 straight years. Now, granted, Wisconsin hasn't had a good quarterback since Russell Wilson. So they're not really throwing the ball a ton, but I mean, it's kind of neither here nor there. He's not really giving up a whole lot of pressure. And he can get to the second level. He can get out into the open field, make effective blocks. I have him ranked 5th. He's a solid day 2 guy. Another one that I think would be perfectly acceptable in round 2, round 3. Sure.
So we have
I would rather, for where the Giants are picking, they're picking a little high for him in the 2nd round.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're picking a little late for him in the 3rd round. I think he actually falls somewhere in between that.
So it sounds a lot like Schmitz in terms of the 1st round pick. You're not really comfortable at 25, but you don't think he'll get to 57.
Yeah, and I think you're less likely to be trading down your second round pick than your first round pick.
Yeah, we'll see. But he's certainly a guy that a lot of people have drawn eyes to. Like when you listen to people on Twitter, he's certainly become a more popular name that people want the Giants to draft. And I think a lot of it has to do with his combine.
Yeah, once you kick ass at the combine, it's hard to ignore.
Yeah, exactly. Next guy we're going to pull up, he's another guy that a lot of people have been talking up. I've seen him being mocked in the third round area a lot, but a lot of Giants fans have been talking about Olu Oluwatimi out of Michigan. 309 pounds. He's 6'2". Only ran a 5'3", 840. So, not that matters much at the center position, but not the same athlete as a guy like a Joe Tippmann, who we just previously talked about, for example. A lot of people view him as a project, but a project that may be worth taking. In terms of his PFF, last year, 918 offensive snaps. He had 508 run blocks, 410 pass block snaps, did not surrender a sack. The year before, he did surrender 3. So a big improvement there. Only gave up 5 hits, 4 quarterback hurries. The one thing I will say, that look at the pass block snaps the year before, 664 and only 246 run block snaps. Michigan completely changed their offense year over year. So that probably has a lot to do with why he surrendered more sacks. But a guy that I've seen a lot of people talking up, and a guy that a lot of people seem to like, specifically in the third round area for the New York Giants.
He was on Virginia's squad in 2021.
Oh, well, then that explains it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say that makes him one of the hardest guys to really grade, because I think it's difficult to tell how much upside he really has. He's an experienced center. He's played a lot. He went from a smaller school to a bigger school. Look, when you leave Michigan, to me, you've had NFL coaching, right?
Right. Of course. Harbaugh.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's what makes it difficult for me, is that he doesn't show me a whole lot of upside. He shows me a lot of floor that looks pretty good, and I'm pretty happy about that. It's really difficult for me to tell like how much more upside there is. Is this all he is? Because if this is all he is, it's not that bad. I mean, he has I'd say he excels in the pass blocking game. He has a good anchor. He has good base. He doesn't usually lose. He's not usually chasing guys. He can handle bigger dudes pretty well. He trades work really well. He doesn't have any drive in the run blocking game. And I don't know. I think that's going to be a problem for the Giants staff, right? I mean, Daniel Jones, when he's your quarterback, run game is always going to be a little bit of something, because if it's just a day where the corners are good or it's a bad matchup on the outside, you always have that in your back pocket, especially when you team it with somebody as dynamic as Saquon Barkley. If you can't generate drive, though, that's not going to be like – I just feel like there's guys that can do that. So to me, this is the ultimate floor-only guy, and I could be completely wrong with that. But I think the switch from Virginia to Michigan and not seeing a huge jump from him in that time, that's where it comes from. It's not coming from a place of, nowhere. And I even saw him at the Senior Bowl, and he didn't really super duper stand out there either, which is like, it's just everywhere he was, he never really truly all the way stood out. It's hard to imagine him just suddenly blossoming, right? But I mean, again, he's solid. It's not like he has taste.
He sounds a lot like Shane Lemieux when he was coming out. Like,
that's a lot, and that was a 5th round pick.
Yeah, that's what I heard about him. Everybody said solid, not much of a ceiling. That's what you said. That when you're talking to me about him, that's what you're describing for me. A guy that you probably want as a depth player in your football team, not necessarily a starter.
I would say of the day 2 guys in that block that I'm struggling to stack in the right order, he's probably the most polished pass protector.
Yeah.
And for that reason, I have him rated a little bit higher. I might change my mind on that, though. He's a difficult one for me to place. And I've been watching him since before the college season started this year. So
yeah. What do you have ranked? What do you have ranked?
I currently have him ranked 2nd. After all that.
All that you have ranked. So he's your 2nd center on the board, but his ceiling, it seems like.
But like I said, like all that from 2 through, let me see, 6, I could move him around. So he could just as easily be 6th.
They're interchangeable.
Yeah.
And it sounds like his strength is in the pass blocking, but not so much.
Yeah, and in today's NFL, I think that's like super duper important. But like for the Giants, it's like versatility is important and run game is important. So it's like, it's just difficult.
But again, a guy that's I think all these guys basically, except for maybe the last guy we talk about, are going to be day 2 guys. Maybe there'll be one guy that's kind of squirts into that's a surprise that squirts into day 3. But the majority of these guys are going to be day 2 guys.
Yeah.
Next up, we're going to talk about the center out of Notre Dame. Obviously, very famous for producing pretty good offensive linemen, tight ends. Jarrett Patterson, the center, 306 pounds, 6'5". He ran a 5.33. And he's another guy that's kind of like a third round area. Last year, at Notre Dame, he had 827 snaps, 445 run blocks, 382 pass block snaps, didn't surrender a sack, 1 hit, 8 hurries. All these guys, for the most part, didn't give up many sacks. But you don't really expect that from your center position unless you're a New York Giant. They seem to give up a ton. But let's talk about Patterson. What do you think about him?
Jarrett Patterson, if I'm not mistaken, he has center guard versatility. And I'm basing that on what I saw at the Senior Bowl, which is stupid because they make everybody do stuff. But I'm pretty sure he has center guard versatility. He's also a little bit taller than the other guys. He's 6'5", 303. Yep. I don't think that's a problem. I do think eventually you can get too tall to be functional at the inside. I think it's more likely you'll start bending at the waist more than your knees when you reach a certain height. I like Jarrett Patterson. I have him ranked 7th. I think he's a late day 2 guy. I think he's just out of this group. My biggest thing is I think his upper body strength is kind of a joke. At the combine, he pushed 22 bench press reps for an O lineman.
Not good.
I don't like that. I'm sorry. That's not. I work out with a dude that can almost do that, so I wouldn't draft him either. But he does do some pretty good there. He's got pretty good form. He's got pretty good technique on pass pro. Like I said, that's an industry standard in the NFL now, is pass protection before run blocking. He keeps his hands active and busy. Obviously, hand fighting is something he's going to need to develop. But the fact that they're already active, busy, he's breaking things off of his chest, that's a start. That means there's less to do there. I think like with that lack of strength, though, he tends to lean to compensate, right? And that's usually what happens. When you're less strong, you throw your body weight into people. And that's when you can get clowned. When you're Notre Dame, you play, who's your hardest opponent? Navy?
They mix in a hard game here and there. They play USC.
They do. I know. I like to give Notre Dame people crap, but they only really have, just like Ohio State, they have like 2 or 3 games a year that's like a true test, and they play a lot of scrubs in a row. So when you look at bulk stats, you're not really getting a great picture. But at the NFL level, if you're leaning too much, the savvy defensive tackles at the NFL level will absolutely embarrass you.
No doubt.
They'll embarrass you. So that worries me a little bit, and that's why I have him parked a little bit lower. I could still see him going in the 2nd round. Again, that versatility at center guard is important.
Yeah.
But I do think he might be a round 4 guy.
Everything I heard about him, people say that he, like you said, even though maybe the 40 time may not indicate it, I've read that he's good at getting to the 2nd level. He's a good puller. I've read that in several different places about him. So, but lacks strength. That's not 22 bench reps for an offensive lineman, an interior offensive lineman. Not really where you want to be. So,
not my favorite. No.
Yeah. This guy, a lot of people seem to like, and he looks like my kind of guy. This is the type of guy I could take out on a date. I love youth football players, and look how sloppy he is. I love it. Ricky Stromberg coming out of Arkansas. I've seen a lot of people love him. I think he's got the highest PFF grade of any guy. Did not give up a hit this past year. Did not give up a sack this past year. Gave up 11 hurries, 898 offensive snaps, 482 in the run, 416 in the pass. A vast improvement over 2021, in which he gave up 3 sacks, 2 hits, and 7 hurries. So had a really strong year this past year at Arkansas. And you've seen him start to move up mocks a little bit as well. And I've seen a lot of Giants fans liking him as a 2nd or 3rd round prospect for this football team.
I love Ricky Stromberg. I got to ask you, though, if you're taking him out on a date, what are you getting, steak or barbecue?
Oh, we're going to an all-you-can-eat, like, Brazilian buffet. Like when they
Radicchio?
Yeah, absolutely.
I've had that. It's fantastic.
And you got to flip it from red to green. One of those jobs. Like, he's definitely going to eat the place out of business.
They don't give you napkins. They give you a whole roll of paper towels.
Yes, exactly.
I love Ricky Stromberg. Look, before we started this call, I didn't look at his PFF anything. I didn't look at his RAS score anything. I barely looked at his combine anything. I just watched the film of him, and I really liked him. I didn't expect to. 6'3", 306. He has something that you can't teach. You can't teach. Not that many people have. And I think it's super effective. And that's the nasty demeanor. You watch him, dude. He doesn't give a shit. He'll throw people all over the place.
He's got like those Nick Gates vibes. Like
he's going to tell you how bad you are. But he's got active, violent hands. He moves to the second level really well. He has just enough stall in him to make people. Let's use some jargon here. He has just enough delay and I guess feint in him to stall defensive tackles from going straight into their pass rush, and then he can accelerate to that second level, get good body position, and wallop somebody at the second level and be effective. I mean, really, it doesn't even matter if it's super clean. He's just consistently very effective. He could clean up some technique here and there, especially pass blocking. He can improve his, pad level, helmet placement, his punch timing, I think sometimes is a little off minorly. I think obviously just about everybody coming out in the draft, hand fighting can be improved, but it's already very active. It's already very, very violent. He just needs the knowledge of when to do what. My biggest concern with him is I'm just not sure if anchoring against the larger nose tackles at the NFL level will be an issue for him just forever. And if that's my biggest concern, I can live with it, because with a center, you're not facing Fletcher Cox every week. So those particular weeks, you can scheme something up to make it work, if that's the only problem. I have him ranked 3rd of all centers, and I would be very comfortable taking him day 2. Very
57, you're in? Pick 57?
I could see, based on the way the draft board is falling, I don't think they're going to do that, but I think it's more like move up from, what are we picking round 3, 89?
I think it's 89, I think.
I could see I'd be comfortable moving up if he's falling from there.
Okay. Or moving back from 57.
Or moving back from 57. But
yeah. Okay. Yeah,
I was surprised at how much I liked him. Yeah.
A lot of people like him. I've seen a lot of people talk highly about him. Next up, we're going to talk about the one guy that apparently the Giants like, because we've seen and a lot. I saw a lot of articles written about him the last couple of days, not just with the Giants, but a lot of teams around the league who a lot of people had Juice Scruggs as like a round 5, round 6 guy, definitely like a day 3 guy. And he appears to be garnishing a lot more interest than a lot of people were projecting earlier on coming out of Penn State. He's 6'3", 301. He ran a 5'2", 240. And let's jump into his PFF score. Well, at Penn State, another Big Ten guy, which you expect. The Big Ten is notorious for developing strong offensive linemen. His grade this past year, not there. But he had 886 offensive stats, 406 run, 480 pass, 1 sack, giving up 3 hits, 10 hurries. So tell me a little bit about Juice Scruggs, because I know the Giants are interested. Are you?
I am. And I like that picture of him too, because he's a big, hairy guy. And I think that's important for an offensive lineman. Look at those hairy upper arms.
He looks mean. I love him. I love this guy. I take him out on day 2. I love him.
Yeah. No, he's great. I actually, another one, I was just like, who the hell is this? I saw the same report you did. I was like, they're talking to the Penn State center. I didn't even know. And I looked him up. I was like, was he like kind of the center? No, he was the center the whole time. I'm like, okay. So I watched some stuff. Not bad. I mean, he's not in that block of guys that are, I'm going to say day 2, but I think it's perfectly acceptable to get a day 3 center and have him develop into a long-term center. I mean, right. Sean O'Hara was like a 7th round pick, I think.
I mean, yeah, that's the beauty about that offensive line that we had back then. We had
none of them were big, yeah.
None of them. McKenzie was a free agent. We brought him in, but none of them were first-round picks. And they just gelled together. I think the biggest thing with an offensive line is playing together over the course of 4 or 5 years, like learning to play together as a unit. And that's something that the Giants need to, continue to develop. But
I think also, like, as part of that unit and the continuity of it is the offensive line coach, right?
Yes.
I mean, the 5 guys can play together, but if you're switching offensive schemes and coaches, I mean, if you got Colombo in there, and
we had
getting
Colombo,
the fist fights,
we had what's his name? We had
Googe.
Yeah, Guglielmo, or however you pronounce. Yeah, we had him. We had basically 3 offensive line coaches that first year because Judge took over temporarily. So it was a mess. And if you recall, Joe Judge was doing the musical chairs with the offensive line, which I couldn't stand. He was bringing guys in and out, drive to drive. It wasn't even game to game. It was drive to drive, new guard, new tackle. I couldn't stand it.
It's hard to imagine that the New England Patriots brought Bill O'Brien to fix the offense, huh? There was somehow that special teams coordinator and defensive coordinator running the offense didn't work. I'm not shocked.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, Juice Scruggs, I like him actually. I think he's a probably a round 4, round 5 guy still, but that doesn't mean that he's not good or that he's not going to develop into a steady center. It doesn't mean any of that stuff. It just means he's probably not a year 1 starter, which if Joe Shane is perfectly comfortable with Ben Bredesen being the guy to band-aid this year, that makes this a valid potential pick, right?
Yeah. Yeah, because you got your stopgap guy for a year and you got your guy maybe a guy like Drew Scruggs is a guy they view as has more upside than a lot of these other players, but he's not quite as far along in his journey.
Yeah, and you know what? I have like the way I break these down into like real quick hitters is I have a how he fits kind of section, and you hit it. Depth and developmental piece with upside in attitude and athleticism. Those are the things he's already got. I think he can expand upon them, get even better. He's mean. He's got scrappy, active hands, good lateral movement. He's pretty good at handling stunts, which I don't know why this NFL team can't do it. I see college units do it just fine. But for whatever reason, the Giants have been terrible at handling interior stunts.
Yeah.
I think his biggest thing, he's got to work on just getting hands off of him. And I think that's fairly common for guys coming out of the college level. I think Juice Scruggs is one of those guys that we'll hear about in 2 years and be like, where was he on draft day? And I mean that like from an NFL standpoint. The Giants met with him. Giants fans will remember him. But I think, I don't know, Vikings fans, name a team, it'll be NFL news in 2 years. Like, where was everybody on draft day with Juice Scruggs? Why did nobody have him rated higher? I think that's a very real possibility for him.
And there's been several teams that come. I saw the Bears were interested in him. There was like 4 or 5 different teams that have shown some interest in him over the last week. So something must be popping up on film with why he's starting to garnish a lot more attention than he was.
Or it's the interviews, man. He could just be a very intelligent guy. I mean, what's his name? James Franklin, the coach, Penn State?
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, that's a solid coach right there. He continually puts together a solid recruiting class outside of the fact that PSU just recruits very well out of New Jersey and Connecticut and stuff. But, I mean, I do think that they churn out intelligent players year after year, with the exception of Micah Parsons.
Yeah, screw that guy. We got a pretty good one, though. Saquon. We'll see how long that lasts, but we got a pretty good one.
Yeah. And that's another intelligent guy. So, right. I like him. I think he's a possibility. I think he's a round 4, round 5 guy. And I think once you get down there, it starts becoming like a waterfall of like, if he doesn't go with this pick, it might be like 35 picks later. You know what I mean? Like, that's when things get jumbled. But 3 weeks ago, I would have been super happy. I would have been perfectly fine with being like, we drafted Juice Scruggs. We re-signed John Feliciano for 1 year. That would have been ideal to me. You've got your developmental piece. I like his upside. I like what he can bring. You've got a guy for this year. Maybe at some point this year they switch places. That would be sick. If not, it's okay. And they get a whole year to evaluate him in practice too. And if they feel at the end of the year, it's like, we might have whiffed. You have a whole other draft to deal with it.
5th round pick, whatever.
You have a whole other draft. You have other free agency. You didn't waste anything as an asset. Now where they are with Ben Bredesen, I'm way less comfortable with that, but I could still.
The guy's never played center. And once again, you're asking it, and it was the same position we were in with.
He had like 8 games as a functional guard. It's not like he has a huge history here.
Yeah, I am not. If I'm the GM and we're not, I'm taking a center at 57. I'm not even waiting to pick 89. I'm finding my guy that I like at 57, and I'm taking him. And they've got a lot of options. I think every center we talked about in this video would be perfectly acceptable by everything that I've read to take at 57 outside of probably the last guy we talked about in Drew Scruggs. Pick your guy if he's there. Obviously, if there's a runoff of centers, we can't predict that. But if 2 or 3 or 4 centers are off the board on draft day, I'm going to be hoping Joe Shane takes a center.
Is there any particular guy that jumps out at you? Is there like 2 or 3 guys you're like, man, these are the guys I really like?
I've looked at some highlights of these guys. I don't pretend to be like a film expert. I'm a fan of Stromberg for a lot of the reasons that you said. He's big, he's mean, he's nasty. He did have a high RAS score He was a better athlete than a lot of people projected. I like Avila because of his positional versatility. He's massive. I love big linemen. So those two guys, in terms of like realistic guys, because I don't think we're going to get Schmitz because I think he'll probably go before we pick.
I think you're right.
Those are probably the two guys I'm hoping for at 57 on draft day. One of those two.
I do think that John Michael Schmitz is going to be drafted higher than I have him rated. I do think he's going to end up going in the first round. I just don't think he's going to go to us. And I don't think he belongs there.
Yeah, he doesn't. From everything that I've read and heard, he doesn't seem like he has the athletic profile of a guy that you'd feel comfortable taking day one at the center. Like Ruiz, for example. I remember really liking him. He came from New Jersey, actually, and he had a really high ceiling. And I don't know if he's panned out too well at the NFL level, but he was a guy that had a really high athletic profile. So I wasn't surprised that when he went in the first round, same thing with Tyler Linderbaum. A guy like Schmitz, by all accounts, he's sturdy, he's good, but he doesn't project to be your typical first-round center.
I mean, is there a typical first-round center? It's not even that often that a center is taken in the
first round. It's kind of like the running back position. Like
they have to be all-world.
Yeah. So, and he does not project to be all-world.
I think I agree with you, but I do think that he's good and steady enough. I think there's probably
I'd be completely fine. I'm gonna be honest with you. I'd be completely fine if we took him at 25.
Really?
Because I think it's that big of a need. I don't think we're going to.
No, I don't think so either. But
I wouldn't even say at this point it's my preference. I'm gonna prefer a wide receiver or corner when push comes to shove because there's gonna be a player at one of those two positions that I think warrants the pick. And Shane is a positional value guy, and I completely understand that argument. And I think there are plenty of centers that we talked about in this video that would be fine taking a 57. So when push comes to shove, I'm going to be probably hoping we could go wide receiver or center. But if I hear Schmitz's name called on draft day at 25, I'm not going to be screaming. I'm not going to be throwing my beer at the TV. Let's put it that way. I'm going to be like, okay, we got hopefully a plug and play starter for the next 10 years at that position.
Yeah, I think I'm going to feel the same way. It's not sexy. It's not going to, I'm not going to parade around my house the way I did when we drafted Andrew Thomas, which I absolutely did. But yeah, I think I'd be comfortable with it. I would be confused. I'd be shocked. I don't think that they're going to do that.
I don't think they're going to either. I don't think they're going to either.
But yeah, I would feel like, holy shit, we're doing it, man. This is it. Like we're going to have they are investing in this offensive line. Like they are putting points on the board in years to come. So, I mean, I guess I'd be like,
at the end of the day, Grump, this is the way I look at it. Yes. Most people will trash the pick if they take Smith.
Oh, yeah. They're going to trash the pick no matter what.
I don't think we're going to do. But if you're watching this video and being honest with yourself, if Schmitz works out to even be an average starting offensive center in the NFL for the next 10 years, are you going to look back on the 2023 draft and be pissed? No. You're going to be happy. You got your center for the next 10 years.
What the hell was the last time we had an average center?
Yeah, exactly. So if Joe Shane feels that, I'd be okay with it. I'd be happy with it. I just don't think it's going to happen, especially with the way that he's talked about the position. I think we're going a wide receiver or corner, which is why I'm a little bit more interested in getting to know some of these other guys because I think we're looking day 2, maybe even day 3 at the center spot, depending on who falls to us at 57 and 89 on draft day.
And that said, just because they picked it on day 3, if they do, it's not the end of the world. I know we already said it, but I think it bears repeating is that like a lot of offensive linemen that end up being good are picked round 3, round 4, round 5.
Especially
it's not uncommon at all for an interior offensive lineman to be picked late day 2 into day 3 and still have a good, solid career. Most of those guys, most centers are not drafted in the first round and early second round. In the league of the 32 that exists, like most of them were not drafted there. So it's really not a big deal. It doesn't mean it's being deprioritized.
No, and I don't think it is. I think Shane's smart enough to see how bad this interior offensive line was last year and know that it needs work. But I think he's going to kind of do a combination of hoping, some of the younger players that he drafted, whether it be McKeithen and Azudu last year, further develop, and him getting guys that he feels like could further develop in 2023 and 2024 in this year's draft. I don't think he's going to prioritize it as a day 1 or potentially even day 2 pick, but we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. But hopefully we end up with one of these guys on draft day because it's certainly a huge need of ours, especially after we lost Feliciano and Nick Gates to free agency. But we'll see how it plays out. we'll do another one of these hopefully a little bit later in the week. We'll just talk about it, whether it be day 2, maybe we'll do a mock draft. We'll figure it out. There's plenty to talk about. The draft starts in less than a month now, which is crazy. How quick this is coming up. And we'll probably do a recap video as well. I'd love to have you on recapping the picks that we made throughout the draft and talking about the prospects. So thanks again for coming on. Thank you to everybody for watching. Again, we went about an hour, and hopefully you guys enjoyed the content. Be good, guys.